everyone, welcome back to my channel. So for this week's topic, we want to address a very common requirement from the AP team, how to actually send vendor payment remittance report through email automatically from Dynamics 365. So in short, the business requirement is every time when we run a check payment or EFT payment, the system is going to generate a payment file that you can send out to the bank to actually process the payment. But at the same time, I also want the system to generate a report giving me the list of all invoices that payment is going to settle against, right? That way I can send out this report to my vendor through email and let them know, okay, now we have issued this payment. Here are the invoices within the payment. Please let us know if you haven't received, etc. Right? And in this episode, we're going to review step by step what are the required configurations, and we are going to do an actual testing to show you the outcome of that email sending feature. Again, before we start, if you really like the content and want to support me to move forward with more valuable content, please feel free to subscribe, comment, and like the video. Thank you in advance for your support. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. The first configuration point is going to be your email address, server, or parameters, because without that email sending feature set up, you're not able to communicate and send that report through email. Straightforward. So to get that part done, you are going to need to get to system admin, and then within system admin in their settings, you have the section called email, and then we can open up this email parameters. Just a side note here, quite often this part can be completed by the technical team. They know the server information, what's the batch email provider, etc. So feel free to check that out with them. Or there are a lot of Microsoft Learn documents to further explain all the required steps. So I will not deep dive into all the technical details in this episode, but feel free to check it out. And the basic settings are first the configuration. You need to define a batch server provider, and then we're using SMTP in this case, and then also next, you can set up the outgoing mail server, the user email address, and then also very important from user side, you can actually test out if the email server is set up correctly. That's through this test email section. So you can select your email provider, in my case that's SMTP, and then type your email address, send test email. That way you can actually know if you receive an email and make sure the email setting is complete. All right, so this is step one. Once you have the email ready, now we can move on to step two, which is set up your vendor. Let me actually go back to accounts payable and find out all vendors form, and then now we're going to focus on this example, first vendor account. So let's say why we need to update the vendor form is basically we need to let the system know now I have a payment for this vendor, which email address the system should pick up, right? So this is the purpose of this second configuration point. We need to define a contact information on the vendor master data. So very important, we need to use the purpose field, very similar to the address section, right? So depending on the purpose, if this is remit to, it's going to be used on the payment journal, with this address. And if this set to invoice, then it can be used on vendor invoice. So same thing for contact. Now we can do this example together. So first I click add, and now I can type the description. For example, remit to email address, and then the type, straightforward, I will select email address, and then I can type this contact information. So let's say my vendor is Jane Doe at outlook.com. This is their remit to email address, and this is not done. Super critical point is we need to assign a purpose. So I click here, edit contact information, and you see there is a purpose field. By default, the business value is assigned here, but actually we want to set the remit to as purpose. But you're going to say how we can find this remit to. It's not available in this list. So to enable this remit to type under contact, you have to go to your organization admin. Okay, I'm going to open up another tab. Actually, I already have this show up on screen, but you can follow the same path. So it's under organization admin, global address book, address and the contact information purpose. So from this list, you can see for remit to this line, currently it's only enabled for the address. It's not enabled for contact. So what you need to do is hit this edit and then check this box for contact information, save it. And once you're done, we can go back to our vendor master, and then I'm going to open up this purpose drop down. And from here, you see remit to now is available again, right? I will check this remit to and uncheck business type. So select, and now you see I have the correct purpose assigned. And of course, you can mark this as primary, and then I can do OK. So in case you have multiple remit to addresses, and you can list all of those here with the purpose remit to, and then the system is going to send the report to all the available email addresses here from this list. All right, so with that, we have completed the vendor setting, so we can save it. And now we can move on to our third configuration point, which is print management. And before we do that, actually, we need to know the report name. And from that report name, we can define what's the correct printing method we want to use, whether print on paper or show on screen or send through email. So to get there, you need to open up accounts payable, and then in the setup section, under forms, we can click here, form setup, and you see print management is available here. I'll select this one. So this is a list of standard existing reports where you can kind of customize which report the system should use and what's the correct printing method the system should use, right? In my case, I only care about this payment advice for now. So this is the remittance report. And now we need to add or edit a version of this report. So I'm going to right click and then click new. You see it's generating a first version where we can define how this report should be printed. So currently I select the original version, and then you see here report format. Here is where you define if you have any customized or developed report, you can select from the drop down, but from our scenario, we're using the system standard report, right? And what you need to change, very important part, is this destination. So I'm going to click here to add it to destination, select the printer setup. So you see here are all the options. You can print on screen, through printer, save as a file on SharePoint, for example, or send through email. So in our case, I select this email. And then on the destination part, to whom you need to send this email, you can actually do edit and select the vendor purpose with remit to. So that means every time for that payment line, the system will identify, okay, this is a vendor account. And then it's going to send out an email with the attachment of this report payment advice. And the email address should be this vendor email address with the purpose of remit to, right? And you can also check this vendor primary contact. So that's only sending to the primary contact. And if you have any additional people you want to inform, then you can also add those email addresses here in this box. And this is a generic setting. It's going to apply to all EFTs or checks. The system will reference the setting of destination every time you enable that print management option. So in my case, I'll keep OK here. And of course, you can add CC. And then the subject, that's your email title. Let's say I just put remittance, testing, and file format. You don't need to change anything. Here's your email body. If you want to add a signature or provide more text, feel free to do so. I will just put tester here. All right. And you are basically all done. So you can do OK. And this is the print management setting for email, right? So now, so far, we have completed all the settings. We are ready to perform a testing. But I just want to make a highlight here. Before you actually start testing, you need to be very careful about the data you're using. Because even though you're in UAT environment, but as long as the email batch server is enabled, and if you pick the correct vendor account with the payment information and using the sprint management, you are going to send out this testing data to your vendor, and that vendor will actually receive an email address if everything works, right? So to prevent that happening, you don't want your vendor to receive testing data, then a couple of recommendations here. One is you can restrict your email batch server in UAT to only a selected list of users who can actually send out email from UAT. So that's one way. Please work with your technical team. Secondly, it's also recommended to create a dummy vendor. So on that dummy vendor, you can associate it to your own email address as contact and with dummy bank information. So you can make sure all the testing is around this vendor account. So no real vendor will receive anything from their inbox. Right. So now let's start doing a quick testing. Enter accounts payable. If you don't have invoice, feel free to create an invoice journal or our purchase order to generate a PO invoice. In my case, I have already plenty invoices on that vendor, so I will go straight to vendor payment journal. And I'm going to create a new one, select the journal type, go to lines. All right, so from here, I will select my vendor account. So this is the first one. And then you can give a description. Here, you need to settle a transactions to mark an invoice, or you can also do payment proposal. In my case, I will pick this invoice, for example, click OK. It's important to select an invoice. Otherwise, when you generate that payment advice report, you will see within the report, it shows up as there's no data available, because in this report, it actually lists all the available invoices you're going to settle. So if you don't select the invoice, then there's no data to show up on that report. All right, now we have the debit auto-populated, and then we can see the payment method is check. So next step is going to generate a check payment. This is really standard or regular process, right? So you select the export format, making sure the bank account matches the one on your journal line, and then we can do OK. So this is where you can control whether this payment advice report should be printed and which printing method it should use. So if you disable this print management, then you can still say, I want to print this payment advice report, but you need to actually click here to define individually for each payment line what should be the printing method, right? Or the other way is I will enable this use print management. So the system will know, okay, now the user wants to print payment advice report, and also the user wants to apply the print management printing method that we defined previously, right? So this is our case. I'll leave it enabled. So it's going to pick all the vendor email addresses with the purpose of remit to. So from here, I will do OK. So now it's printing checks, but just a heads up, you will see error messages, and this is on purpose. I don't want to send out any emails to actual vendors or testing vendors. So currently the email sending feature is blocked in my environment. So you're going to see a few errors there, but normally if your email is set up correctly, you will see kind of a notification message saying, now here is your check generated, and you have also sent out an email with attachment. So we're going to see this. All right, so now we have the check report generated, and as expected, you see this error while printing after trying 3 times. So it's normal that I don't have my SMTP set up correctly on purpose. So as I said, you will see a notification here. Next step is you can open up your email inbox and check if you actually received that email, right, with attachment. So when you open up that attachment, you should be able to see that payment advice report. And let's say from system admin perspective, even though you don't have that email address available to check if you actually receive it, you can also check it from the system. So you can actually use the search bar and then type batch email. Right, so you have the first one here, batch email sending status, enter system admin, periodic tasks, email processing. And when I open it up, you can actually see all the history of email sending, and you can check here email history. It's going to show you, okay, we actually have this remittance testing with this email address we set up, right, with date and the email sender. And you see the status is failed on purpose, but normally you should be able to check from which account this email is out, and then it's sending to which recipients from this screen. All right, so this is everything I want to cover within this episode. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to comment down below, and also check out other available videos. I'm sure you will find something useful. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.